Many thanks for that wonderful presentation. Let me add Evi to the stream and Jan as well. So the first thing sort of which directly resonated with me, which made me sort of the issue concerning technology, equality, power, which you addressed, which seems to be a central one, sort of is if we use technology in the global south being employed, being used, is that a new type of, it could be seen as a new type of neocolonialism, as a new way of taking over. On the other hand, it could also see if it's offered as a solution, it could actually be something which is in the interest in the end, if it's used maybe on medical technologies, which is something which is needed, which is wanted. Or on the other hand, it destroys local cultures. So that raises some very interesting issues, and these are the ones I would personally like to investigate further. I sort of my take would be, I mean, if you just add up, sort of if it's offered, if it's presented as an offer, and if also sort of the financial power structural aspects are taken into consideration, if it's not imposed, then it could actually be seen as something which is embraced, if accepted, and could be in the interest and promote actually the quality of life, and doesn't have to be seen as neocolonial. But I would be curious to hear what your take on that issue is.
Well, other than ethics, political implication of post-trans meta discourse is also very important to us. That is because as we extend our horizon towards a post-human future, we also have to redefine and rethought or rethink what we call democracy, especially when it comes to countries like ours, like the Philippines, developing countries as well as third world countries, because of the difference in economic status, countries as well as individuals do have different situations. It is very important, for example, for us in the Philippines, that we need to assess whether we can afford the technology whenever the technology is already available. If it's not available, then it's very difficult for us to exercise morphological freedom, because in our minds, morphological freedom is only for those citizens of rich countries, and they enjoy it. But we, having nothing to afford, or having no means to afford these technologies, we cannot exercise morphological freedom. And also, Stefan, you mentioned about decolonialism, or the situation like that. As scholars from developing countries, we are trying to decolonize various disciplines within our boundaries. Actually, we are attempting to indigenize many disciplines, and we are trying to theorize beyond the frame of Western theorizations. And this is very difficult. Filipino scholars have been trying to do this indigenization 60 years, or even in the 60s. But we are way far from realizing this nativist theoretical tradition. Being this as a background, we take posthumanism as something which is another current coming in Filipino academies, as a tradition which is grounded and cultivated in advanced capitalist societies. Hence, among scholars, there is what we call misgivings as regards posthumanism. That's why this is the reason why, as early as now, if we are not late, we are trying to interrogate it, and we are trying to find some grounds where we can theorize in local context as regards posthumanism.
May I just suggest that in this context, and bringing in this plurality of metahumanistic transfers, debates, it's important, I think, to exceed the idea that there's, on the one hand, technology, but which is normally just conceived as digital and maybe at the most mechanical digital, which means dominant Western paradigm.
Yeah.
Versus non-technology, and I think that's of course wrong, because every culture has had its technologies. We have loads of other technologies, body technologies, which are non-mechanical and non-digital, and they allow different kinds of freedom, each of them, and we need to probably understand what types of movement each technology is symptomatic of, or the dominance it is expressing, if we want to reinvent it in much deeper ways, rather than avoiding the idea of technology as being neutral, a neutral medium that you can just use good or in a good or bad way. I think that's a completely wrong approach to technology. We need to be symptomatologists. We need to understand which are the dominant expressions that technologies are an expression of, or a medium for, and we need to always look beyond in understanding that there are endless other technologies to be invented, and also to learn from the past, even from tribal cultures of all kinds. Body intelligences, body technologies of all kinds, which may show us potential future ways of having more sustainable relationships with the planet and with each other.
Yeah. Well, we are actually, personally, I'm very happy that there are works like that of James Hughes and trying to democratize transhumanism. And also the ethics developed by Donna Haraway, posthumanism ethics developed by Donna Haraway and Patricia McCormack, the works of Patricia McCormack. This is a very good direction towards posthuman ethics, but the challenge is that scholarship on posthuman ethics should also include various contexts, meaning it should also include context and circumstances outside advanced capitalist societies. Yeah, that's actually one of the things I think is lacking in most of posthuman ethics scholarship nowadays. They sort of like forgotten that there are some other contexts outside advanced capitalist societies, contexts such as the third world and the developing countries.
Joseph, I would like to address some questions that might be a little bit off topic, but still important for me. One of your last research papers was devoted to COVID pandemic in Philippines, and I would like to ask you whether you see some correspondences between the situations with COVID in your country and some posthuman topics, like, for instance, posthuman ethics that you've mentioned.
Yeah. So you are talking about the culturally oriented approach to COVID-19. Yeah. Well, the idea is that I think that situations and approaches that have been adopted in advanced capitalist countries like Spain, Italy, and many others cannot just easily be adopted in our country, because we have a different set of culture, and these cultures are very ingrained in every individual. And I think it is very important to consider this culture before making a universal approach in addressing the COVID-19 situation. Yeah. Perhaps there would be a posthuman approach towards this particular essay, meaning I can still develop the essay and then try to put in elements of posthuman or transhuman, metahuman character to the essay, and perhaps it would be even be more acceptable to posthuman tradition. Yeah. Thanks, John, for that.
Thanks.
Evi?
Joseph,
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk here and your review. And I tend to agree to a big part of the issues you have posed, especially on those related to the developing countries and post-humanism. However, I have to remind here that these issues have been here, have existed since the humanistic tradition. Yes, and that's why we're talking about colonization and so on. That's why we refer to history for dealing with them.
Yeah.
There is really a need to revise first the humanities from the beginning and the humanistic traditions from the beginning, adapt them in localities, in several localities. That's why I believe that glocalization can be the word. Glocalization, a universalism, an adaptation of post-humanism in all cultures, without their losing their local qualities. Because we can, it's not a strict plan, actually. It can be adapted in each culture. I do agree with you that as for the transhumanist part, what James Hughes is writing in Democratic Transhumanism, for example, and have a basis in politics, can be a direction to which we can turn to. And transhumanism has a lot to gain from this turn. I'm a bit optimistic about this transgression to more critical positions, and to the opening of transhumanism during the recent years to critical matters that transhumanists were not used to turn to. And this is where I believe that the contribution of non-Western cultures and non-Western academics can be huge. And that you have to insist. I already imagine another volume, another reader, a second volume of this reader, where leading scholars from non-Western countries, well, unfortunately, they have to translate their texts in English, actually, as a universal language.
Yeah.
And I do hope there can be a continuation to this. Okay. I also share a lot of your worries from my own country. I do believe it would be very helpful to have this reader translated in Greek also, but this is another story. Okay.
Thanks, Evi.
Just very briefly connecting to the previous talk with Carmel, I think it will never be enough to just discuss these problems ideologically if we keep relating to very humanistic and dualistic media like the one we are using right now. So the reinvention of sensibility, relationalities, and so forth needs to be taken much, much deeper if we want to reinvent our modes of relation and in pluralities of ways of relating that are not assuming. This is the big challenge, not just to disseminate a new idea in the given framework of dualistic media based on perspective, but how to reinvent those very medium at their very architectural level. This is my point always. But,
This is actually sort of, that resonates also, and I'm glad that you've mentioned James Hughes before. I mean, because he's also sort of his take on transhumanism. He's lived in Eastern Asian countries. He actually was a Buddhist monk, and his next book, as I think provisionally entitled Cyborg Buddha, So, and as having lived there for many years, it's sort of that lived experience exchanges. So it is not just a theoretical approach. And here we find possibilities of proper local approaches. So many thanks, Joseph, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much.
Also looking forward to meeting up personally sometime. So we will continue the discussion later on in this discussion forum. So
I do hope you can all come in Lesbos next year.
Yeah, if things would be okay, I may go to the next forum and meet you there face to face.
That would be great.
Lesbos is a beautiful island, actually. We've been there twice already for Beyond Humanism conferences. So I'm passing on the word to Jaime while taking care of the removal processes on Skype.